But going over chapter 5 talked about safety. Who ensures that workers have safe and helpful working conditions? OSHA. It's talking about patient safety. How many patient identifiers, which are usually name and date of birth. It's talking about your standard precautions. What are standard precautions? Yep. What is the main source of HIV, hepatitis, blood? That talks about that. Talks about personal protective equipment, your PPE. Talks about putting on your gloves. Talks about biohazard containers. We did discuss disease prevention, so that remains, screening for those antibodies, and then those pre-employment health profiles, all that good stuff. So we talked about that. So chapter 6 is about quality control and quality assurance. So page 107. The introduction of routine quality assurance programs and quality control in the clinical lab was a major advance in improving the accuracy and reliability of testing. This process assures the clinician ordering the test that the testing method has been done in the best possible way to provide the most useful and accurate most useful information in diagnosing or managing a patient. So that what it's saying is that it is telling that doctor that these results that we get are true and accurate. Okay. So QA indicators and QC are tools to ensure that the reported results are of the highest quality. Here we go with CLIA. So clinical laboratory regulatory and accrediting organizations. CLIA 88, which is the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments Act of 88. In response to concerns about laboratory testing errors, you have, if you go down, you have the Joint Commission, TJC, you have COLA, and you have CAP. The Joint Commission, what do they accredit? Hospitals and labs. What about COLA? All hospitals and physician offices. And what about CAP? Just labs. Okay. Then you go down a little bit more. It's talking about the internal or International Organization for Standardization, ISO. It is the world's largest non-governmental developer and publisher of international standards. So go to non-analytic factors related to testing accuracy. So non-analytic, what does analytic mean? Testing. Non-analytic means non-testing factors that relate to testing accuracy. So qualified personnel. The competence of personnel is an important determinant of the quality of lab results. For example, do you think that an MLT is going to know what they're doing versus a Joe Blow off the street? Will an MLT who's passed the certification exam on this know what to do versus Joe Blow off the street? Yes, they absolutely should. So the competence of personnel is important, meaning you have to have the certification in order to work in the lab. Only properly certified personnel can perform non-wave assays for level of laboratory testing. So we talked about that. Non-wave. So what is wave? Right, right. So it won't cause any damage if you get it wrong. The risk of erroneous result is low. That's what that's saying. And then pretty much anybody can perform it, right? I can go get a pregnancy test from the dollar store and put some urine on it, and that's a non-wave test. Anything that you can pretty much buy at a store would be considered a non-wave test. Sorry, wave. My bad. Wave. So a non-wave would be moderate and high complexity testing. So only those of us that have a certification can perform moderate and high complexity testing. So what that's saying is a nurse. A nurse cannot perform moderate and high complexity testing. Okay. They can perform wave testing, but they cannot perform moderate and high complexity testing. Establish laboratory policies. So laboratory policies should be included in a laboratory reference manual that is available to all hospital personnel. Each laboratory must have an up-to-date safety manual. And who says that we need to have safe and helpful working conditions? OSHA. That's the last little sentence talking about OSHA. So laboratory policy. What's the policy of your lab? What does it state? A lot of times, especially whenever you go to clinical, you're going to have a procedure manual and then you have your lab policies. Your lab policies might be like anything like safety related. It's going to be basically anything not about a procedure. A procedure meaning how you do a test. Okay, that would be your procedure manual. But anything concerning what you need to do in response to this, what you need to do in response to that, like they have policies set by your organization and by your lab. So, for example, you don't know what I'm talking about when I say this, but in blood bank, there is testing. So I've introduced y'all in blood bank, talking about blood types. And I said, so let's just say the person is A positive. This positive right here is called the D antigen. I remember me kind of talking about that a little bit. So this person has the D antigen, right? This person does not have the D antigen. So sometimes people, especially babies and older people with weakened immune systems, theirs might not show up. It might be weak, called a weak D. Well, you used to perform this procedure on anybody that was negative. But now, the AABB, which is American Association of Blood Banks, has said, no, you don't really need to do that on everybody now. You just need to do it on certain people, specifically babies. Okay? So everybody pretty much is like, okay, cool. Let's adopt that. Well, some hospitals were like, okay, that's great and everything, but we're still going to do it our way. We're going to do it the old way. And we're going to do it on everybody that is negative. So, for example, Meadows. Okay, if you have a baby come in that is B negative, you have to do the week D procedure. But anybody else, an adult, another kid, like an adolescent kid, they can come in and be negative, and that's fine. We're not going to do it. Okay. Versus Waynesboro, They're like, no, we're gonna do it on anybody. And what that is saying is that's the policy of that lab. So the policy at Meadows is no, you only do it on babies. But the policy in Swainsboro is no, you're gonna do it on everybody. Does that make sense? So there's different lab policies, okay, for your lab. Well then, the lab procedure manual. So a complete laboratory procedure manual for all procedures performed in the lab must be provided. The manual must be reviewed regularly, in some cases annually, by supervisory staff and updated as needed. So now, let's just say that I worked at Meadows, okay, which this actually happened. So I did my clinicals at Meadows. Well, a week D procedure, is only done on babies, okay? So I remember doing it in clinicals, because I did it on babies, because Meadows has an OB. But then I worked in Swainsboro. So then I got to Swainsboro, and you don't have very many negative people. There's a lot of positives, okay? Meaning more people have to be in than not. And so one day I'm sitting there and I'm in blood bank, and I got a person who was, let's just say, A negative. And at Swainsboro, you have to do the week D procedure, okay? And I was like, ooh, I don't remember how to do that. I mean, I know what it's for, like I remembered all that, but I was like, sure, exactly the steps I need to take. So I went to my lab technician. You know what she looked at me and said? What's your procedure manual say? I was like, okay. I don't know. So I had to go pull my procedure manual, and it gives you step by step what to do. But that's your procedure manual. It's for procedures. So I had this situation. I had to do a week D, which is a procedure that you do in blood bank. It's a test that you do in blood bank. So a pregnancy test. You have a procedure manual where you look up the pregnancy test, and it tells you step for step how to perform that test. It tells you how you should store that test. Is it refrigerated, or do you store it on the shelf, room 10? It tells you what control materials you may need, in which whenever performing testing, you have a positive and a negative, okay? So for HCV. So it tells you about that. It tells you what substances may interfere. I don't know if y'all know this, but sometimes, or contraindications of testing. So sometimes if you have certain cancer, they can be HCV positive. So like tumors can. So one day I had like a 60-something-year-old lady that the ER was doing a pregnancy test on. I'm like, so I get the urine, and I look, and I mean, it has their name and date of birth. So you're like, oh Lord, please, 60 years old, she's gonna be pregnant. So what do? Dropped it, go do some stuff. My timer went off. I come back, and I was like, I was like, So I looked again at the date of birth. I looked at the cup. I looked at my label. It was the same patient. I was like, I called the ER. I was like, can you recollect? Because I mean, my first thought was they put the label on the wrong cup. It's somebody else's pee. It has to be like a 20-year-old that's over there, right? So I was like, can you recollect this? Just confirm. So yeah, she peed again. Same person. So get it, everything matched, did it again, went this and stuff, come back, my timer went off, and I was like, Okay, well, it's positive. But she wasn't pregnant. She had a hysterectomy, all that stuff. And let me tell you, doctors will still order pregnancy tests, even if you say, I have had my tubes tied, I've had a hysterectomy, I've had blah, 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 blah. Because every time now, I don't know if they think you're telling the truth or what. Who knows, some people are. But, I mean, even now, I've had a hysterectomy. I have no uterus. I have nothing to get pregnant with. And even now, they'll still do pregnancy tests on me. And I'm like, and impossible. Like, literally, it's not possible. But they'll still do it on me. And basically, what that is just covering their tracks. So, but if you're like me, you're like, I ain't got to charge for that. You ain't running that on me, paying the $150 for a pregnancy test when I ain't got no uterus. You better cancel it. But anyway, so what it is was this lady had cancer. She had a tumor, and that tumor was secreting HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin, the hormone. It was secreting a hormone. A lot of males who have prostate cancer secrete that hormone when they have prostate cancer. So if a male has prostate cancer, you can get them to actually take a pregnancy test, and sometimes that pregnancy test will come out positive. Obviously, they're not pregnant. But certain cancers, my point is certain cancers can cause a false positive pregnancy test. So it has everything. That procedure manual has everything about that pregnancy test. It even includes the certain types of samples that you can use. So with the ones at Walmart, you can only use pee, right? I mean, well, usually the ones in the lab, you can use urine or you can use serum to draw their blood and use serum. So it tells you, it tells you everything about that procedure. So that is the procedure manual. So test requisition, that's the doctor's order, okay? So a laboratory test requisition must include the following: patient identification data, the time and date of specimen collection, the source of the specimen, and the analysis to be performed. The information on the accompanying specimen container must match the identification on the test request. So this is important. So if you're like the source of the specimen, so that would be like the example I gave you at Fairview. Whenever they sent down that specimen, so usually they'll send down a request with it, and so you'll look and compare name and date of birth. That's the same. But then you look and see that they have a urinalysis order. But then you're looking at this specimen and it looks like sputum. So it's like, so they needed to put the source, which was sputum. Okay. A lot of times, like in micro, the source is very important in micro. Because, which I told y'all earlier, the MRSA can live in the nares. Okay. So whenever you get a specimen, and let's just say it's for MRSA testing, you need to know what the source is. Is it the nares? Is it a wound? Is it something else? Okay, so you always need to know the source. So patient identification, so name and date of birth, the time and date that the specimen was collected, and you're like, well, y'all are doing the collecting and the stuff like that, but not always. Sometimes nursing homes, they'll collect it at the nursing home and then bring it to the lab and drop it off for us to do. So like, you have a resident that's living in the nursing home and they're exhibiting symptoms of a UTI. They'll collect the urine there, but then bring it to the lab so that we can analyze it and all that good stuff. So, but you need to know the time and date on there because you'll learn next semester in your analysis that if you don't refrigerate urine specimens, within 2 hours, it can grow bacteria. So let's just say that this person, and you're like, well, why is the date and time important? So I'll give you an example of that. You have a person at the nursing home, and they collected a urine. They're exhibiting mild symptoms of a UTI. So let's just say that they really don't have a UTI. They might have a yeast infection, okay? So they really don't have a UTI, but the more you let a urine sit there, the more that bacteria is going to multiply. Okay, so let's just say that they collected this urine at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, the nurse let it sit there until 3 o'clock that afternoon and decided to bring it to us. That patient's urine is going to have a lot of bacteria in it, right? Because it's just sat there and multiplied. Because it wasn't refrigerated within 2 hours. So then we look at it and run it, and we see like an abundance of bacteria in it. Well, we're thinking, oh, well, she has a UTI, okay? So then we're going to work it up, do a culture, all this stuff, and then this patient's going to be put on antibiotics. She didn't need antibiotics because she truly doesn't have a UTI. She has a yeast infection. So she needs an antifungal, not an antibiotic. You see what I'm saying? So you're putting her on medicine that she doesn't need to be put on because you let a specimen sit there all day. You see what I'm saying? So that's important to know the date and the time because it can affect patient results. So, and the analysis performed. So what am I doing on this? Am I doing, what I'm saying is your request, like your requisition needs to say what test I'm doing. So am I doing a urinalysis? Am I doing a culture? You get a lavender top tube, okay? And it has everything but the test that you're supposed to do. And you're like, there are 50,000 tests that I can do on this one tube. Am I doing a CBC? Am I doing a SID rate? Am I doing an A1C? What am I doing on this test? I have no idea. You're not mind readers. You don't know. So you have to have that. And if it's not on that sheet, you ain't doing it, okay? There has to be a doctor's order. So patient identification, specimen procurement, and labeling. Patients must be carefully identified. Upon establishing specimen processing information, the specimens must be properly labeled or identified once obtained from the patient. An important rule is that analytic results can only be as good as the specimen. Specimens must be efficiently transported to the lab. For elimination of the most frequent source of pretesting error, a patient must be positively identified when a blood specimen is obtained. This specimen must be properly collected and labeled. In general, hemolyzed specimens should not be used for serologic testing. So going back to labeling and stuff like that, that is super important. And it's also important where if you have like, you get specimens from the ER and med-surg and stuff like that all day, okay? If they're already labeled. You have to, and say, and most of the time, the label that they're putting on it is not the label that you're using, okay? The label that you're using is specific to the lab and is barcoded usually and stuff like that. So they're just using a registration label that prints out whenever you first come to the ER. But you are using specific labels to the lab. So you have to make sure sometimes that those labels match up. So like, for example, in Swainsboro, I'm going to use Swainsboro a lot because I used to work there. So, whenever, let's just say that you get a specimen from the ER, okay? And that specimen, that urine specimen, it has the labels, like the triage labels on it. It has your name, your date of birth, the doctor in the ER. It has your age. It has your hospital number, all this stuff on it, okay? Well, then in Swainsboro, whenever stuff in the ER is ordered, the labels that you're going to use in the lab prints out on a printer, okay? So those labels are printed out, and you grab those labels, and either you have to go draw the blood or you're waiting on the urine to get over there or whatever. Well, a lot of times the urines, because they're coming from the ER, they'll sit them up on the computer and wait for the ER to bring the urines over there. So, and this happened to me because I never did it again after that because I got rid of it. So what happened is the ER brought a urine. It had so-and-so's label on it. Well, the phlebotomist is usually the one that's checking it in. She grabbed another one that was sitting right beside it. She thought she grabbed this person's urine, but she grabbed another patient and did everything and gave it to me. So me, thinking she did her job correctly, did my little barcode. Barcodes are a big thing in the lab now. It's kind of like working at the grocery store. Scan everything. So scanned it, get my urine stick, da da da. I did not check this label to my urine label because I assumed that she already did, right? Never assumed. You know what they say about assuming? Never assumed. Because it went through her and then it went through me. And we were both wrong because I just gave this person's urine on this person. I released it on the wrong person. Okay, and I got rid of it for it. Never did it again though. Always check your labels. Always. Preventative maintenance of equipment. So microscopes, centrifuges, and other pieces of equipment need to be cleaned and checked for accuracy. A preventative, so outside preventative maintenance, you'll hear it called PM. In the lab, they'll say, I have to PM my instrument. And you're like, what the heck is PM? PM is preventative maintenance. So a preventative maintenance schedule should be followed for all automated equipment. Failure to monitor equipment regularly can produce inaccurate test results and lead to expensive repairs, and it can. I have seen it firsthand. Even on that little instrument, the CBC instrument over there, you have a daily maintenance that you're supposed to do on that. And it's literally wiping that probe with alcohol. That's your daily maintenance. That's what you're supposed to do every day. Because if you don't wipe that probe with alcohol every day, that diluent that runs through there that has like saline in it, it'll crystallize on that probe. And then your results will be inaccurate. If you ever, like, if it's left on there and you suck it up, your results won't come in right. Sometimes you have monthly maintenance. So over there with that instrument, you have a monthly maintenance that you have to do. And that's cleaning the inside of the instrument. You have to run some, it's like a clot preventative up in it and a bunch of other stuff. So you have to just do that every month to make sure that that instrument is kept in the best working condition. Sometimes you might have 6-month maintenance on an instrument. 6-month maintenance might be changing probes or changing different things or changing out some stuff. Because sometimes you have to look at these instruments, they're big computers, kind of big robots, essentially. Okay. So what's the core of like a robot? The computer part, right? So it has a computer portion, but then it has all these working parts that you have to maintain also. Because all these working parts, they do the work, right? So you have to make sure that those parts stay in working condition. And you have to think, you're sucking up blood, you're sucking up body fluids, you're sucking up stuff through these probes and through these lines and all this stuff. You have to make sure that this stuff is accurate at all times. Because it can mess up your results, as I have seen it happen. So appropriate testing methods. Another part of a QC program concerns the way new procedures are validated before they're included in the methods routinely used by the lab. Each lab must determine the reproducibility or confidence limits for each procedure used and establish acceptable limits of variation for control specimens. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. So what that is saying is before we use something in a lab, like a new lot, okay, all of your reagents have lot numbers, okay, from your manufacturer. They have lot numbers. And before you start a lot, okay, before you start using a lot, you have to make sure that all of your results that you're getting are accurate with that lot. So you have to do some things before you introduce that and just start releasing patient results. Okay, you have to make sure that what you're doing is accurate. Errors related to the phase of testing. If you go down to the second paragraph, it says most laboratory errors are related to pre-analytic and post-analytic, but the main thing is pre-analytic errors. That's where your main errors are going to come in, is pre-analytic. My kids, they have way too much time on their hands. I got a text from my oldest one just then. It said, go look at my story on TikTok. I don't even, how do you look at a story on TikTok? I didn't know what story, I mean, I knew what stories were on Facebook, but I never seen nothing about a story on TikTok. And it's one kid that says little sister who was annoying. And then it's like the song. And then it says big sister who is also annoying. It's like y'all got too much time on your hands. They're rotten, I'm telling you. But pre-analytic errors. So if you look at box 6.3, the main pre-analytic errors: specimen obtained from the wrong patient. So you accidentally drew the wrong patient. The two main ones, so specimen obtained from the wrong patient and incorrect labeling of a specimen. You labeled it wrong. It's actually Jane Doe's blood, not John Doe's blood. All of those, though, are examples of pre-analytic errors. So then definitions. So this is talking about QC. So it says documentation, I'm on page 109, of QC includes preventative maintenance records, temperature charts, and QC charts for specific assays. So QC means quality control. And what QC is, I'm sorry, go up to quality descriptors. I missed that part on page 108. QC, which is quality control activities, include monitoring the performance of lab instruments, reagents, and other testing products and equipment. A well-written record of QC activities for each procedure or function should include details of deviation from the usual results, problems or failures in functioning, or in the analytic procedure and any corrective actions taken in response to these problems. So let me see. I can find. Okay. So, what it's saying is, so you're going to run QC, which is quality control. And so this is actually a QC printout from Statesboro. And they are running chemistry controls. So what controls are, you have to run controls on all specimens before you run patient results, before you run patients, okay, and release those patients. So what they're doing, so QC is unknown material, or what's actually known, I guess. So QC, you order it from the manufacturer, and depending on your instrument, it can be liquid QC or it just depends. So you run it, and you run it in the same manner as you would a patient. Okay, you put it on your instrument, and it gives you results. Okay, and it comes with reference ranges that it's supposed to be. Okay, so let's just say for BUN, so this is QC1. So depending on what the QC is that you're doing, let's start out simple. So you're doing quality control on a pregnancy test, okay? Your positive should be what? Positive or negative? Positive. Your negative QC should be what? Negative, okay? So you have two levels of control, positive or negative, because that's all that a pregnancy test can be, right? Positive or negative, okay? It gets a little difficult when you're talking about chemistry because they're numbers. So, Na, what's Na? Sodium. So sodium for QC1, so for chemistry and hematology and stuff like that, you usually have levels. Okay, so that would be 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 can be like normal. Level 2 might be low, and then level 3 might be high. Or you might just have two levels of control, meaning normal and high. Okay. So this, just by looking at this, appears to be normal QC. Okay. So what it's saying is all these analytes that are being tested should be within normal range. So, like I said, like I told you, it comes with ranges that it is expected to be. So you run this sodium. It's supposed to be, the control ranges are 118 to 124. So you should get a result that is between 118 to 124. You got 120. So is that within range? Yes. So now can you run patients? Can you run a sodium on a patient? Yes. So you have to do controls to make sure that everything is working properly before you do your patients. Does that make sense? So control have to be done at least daily. For the majority of stuff. It's I don't want to get too far ahead because I don't want to confuse you, but sometimes you might have to run controls once a day, so daily. Sometimes you might have to run controls twice a day. It just depends on your instrument and what you're testing for. Does that make sense? So, for example, the a urine or an HCG, a pregnancy test. You have sometimes on depending on what you're testing, there's two types of controls. There's internal controls and external controls. So, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Not sorry. So, whenever you get a pregnancy test, so has anybody, have y'all seen pregnancy tests before? So, let's just say it's the ones from the dollar store, okay? It's a little cassette like this. And then you have like your little window part right here. And it's usually separated like that. And then you have like a little circle. Right here is where you would put the urine. Okay. And then you might have a C and a T. T means test. C means control. So every time you run a urine or a pregnancy test, this should be positive or have a line. And what that means is that this right here, this kit, this cassette is working properly because it has the line. It's supposed to have a line. Because most of the time you have a line, and then let's just say this one does not have a line. That would mean this pregnancy test is what? Dead. Well, what if you have this? That pregnancy test is positive. Because this is the test portion. You're testing for HCG. So HCG is present. But this is your control. Meaning that this cassette is working like it's supposed to. That would be an internal control because it is located internally in this cassette. Okay. Well, then you have external controls. Okay, external QC. So that is the material that you get from the manufacturer that you use. So let's just say that I dropped my internal control right here, where it's supposed to go. And it's the positive control. It tells you on the bottle. So you have like your little bottles, okay? But it'll have on it. So let's just say I dropped my positive control right there. This should always show up, meaning that this is working, right? And if it's supposed to be positive, then what should I have right there? A line, right? Okay. If I drop my negative control, this is always supposed to work because if it's not there, that means this cassette is off. Okay. But it is always supposed to be there. That's your control. That's your internal control. But if I drop my negative external control, then my test should be negative. Does that make sense? Because there's not any HCG in here. And in this one, there is HCG. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. So, that would be internal and external, the difference in those controls. Well, with chemistry, you don't really have internal QC because it's not a cassette. It's a big instrument. So you use external controls. Okay. So in this little bottle right here, it says that it has a certain amount of sodium in it. And when you run that on your instrument, your sodium should be between 118 and 124. And then you get the result of 120. So that means that your QC came in. Okay? So like this one, you were talking about how often do you do it. Usually for these, it's like monthly. Okay? But for this stuff, it's usually like twice a day. Because you're doing thousands of these. Where versus these, you're only doing one here and there. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it depends on what your lab states, what's in their laboratory manual. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. So looking back at the QC, what is K? Potassium. So it's saying that when you put QC1 on, that in that bottle, it's supposed to contain 4 to 4.4 millimoles per liter of potassium. Well, when you get the result, it's 4.1. So was the QC acceptable for potassium? Yes, because 4.1 is in between these ranges. Okay. So then if you go down, right here. So it says right here that, going back to our reading real quick, it says that a written record of QC activities for each procedure or function should include details of deviation from usual results, any problems or failures in functioning, or any analytic procedure and corrective action taken in response to these problems. So what it's saying is if you have a problem in your QC, you have to figure out what the problem is, document it, and then also document anything you do to correct it, okay? So referring back to this right here, these are so this column right here is any flags that you may get. So if you scroll down, there's no flags on any of this except right here, right? It has a 1. Well, then if you go and look down here, 1 means greater than 2 SD. So we're going to talk about SD in a little while. SD is standard deviation. So that means that it didn't come in. So if you go back up and look, it says LIP. LIP is lipase. So on this lipase right here, and what this is, I'll go ahead and tell you. So this is the chemical thing that you're testing for, this column. This column is the location it is on your instrument. There are different slots that these QC or these reagents go in. And these reagents, so this lipase is located in spot 15. That's what that is. It tells you the lot number. So these two lot numbers are the same. It tells you the SN, your results, your units, control ranges, and any flags. So this lipase, we got a result of 37. What's the reference range? 27 to 35. So it's out of control, right? It's too high. So it says that we're supposed to document what we do. So over here, this person, whoever did it, whoever signature that is, said, okay, it's 37, it's out of control. I see the flag. That means greater than 2 SD. And that's what they said right here. It's positive 2 SD. Will, I don't know what that is, but will re-QC, meaning they're going to rerun it. Okay? So if you go right here, they did. They reran it. So they reran it, and now they got 30. Is that within range? Yes. So they reran it, everything come in, they put their initials, and now they can perform lipase. So up here, this lipase, it was outside of range. Could they do a lipase on a patient at that point? No, they could not, because your QC's out. So if your QC's out, that might mean something's going on. Okay? But down here, they just reran it, and they're like, okay, it must have been just a random error. It was nothing. If they reran it, it was 30, it come in fine, they can now do it. But they had to document what they did. Okay? And I'm gonna give you in a little while, well, I guess I can go ahead and give it to you. So there are 6 steps. 6 steps when your QC is out. So when your QC is out of range, like that one was. So what did this person do? What's the first step they did?
They make sure that they.
So they got that lipase, and so it was out of range. What did they do? Huh? Well, yeah, you document, but what they reran it. Yes. So step number 1, rerun QC. So thankfully it come in. So they didn't need to take any more steps. It solved it, right? But then let's just say that it was still out. Right, well, what do you do now? You already reran it. There's something called calibrate. You're going to calibrate. And we're going to talk about later what a calibrator is. But basically, when you calibrate your instrument, you're resetting it. Okay? Remember I told you to almost kind of look at these like big robots or big computers. Okay? So you reran it and there's still something going on. Okay? Your QC is still out. The next step, you're going to calibrate, aka reset. Okay? Well, then you're going to calibrate, and then of course what? Rerun your QC. Okay? So you're going to calibrate it and then rerun it again. So then you calibrate it, reset your instrument, rerun your QC, and it's out again. And you're like, I reran it, I reset my instrument, it's like, what do I do? So what do you think might be the problem? If it's not, if resetting it didn't help, okay, so I reset the instrument. It might be the instrument still, but what's the first thing that you reset your instrument, so now your mind's going to go to something else? The sample, the QC. So you're going to open up a new QC. So now you're gonna open up a new QC and rerun it again. Still out. So what the QC? So now, remember we talked about just a minute ago, there's some other stuff that you might have to do in order for results to be accurate, like performing maintenance on your instrument. So you're gonna perform maintenance. So I'm gonna perform maintenance on my instrument. Sometimes maintenance can be easy, like over there, like taking an alcohol pad and cleaning the probe, or it can be expensive, like your instrument down for 3 hours. Okay, so the way you have to look at these is maybe I can do some quick fixes, because that might be this before I do something expensive. Okay, so now I'm going to perform maintenance and then of course rerun it again. After all of these, of course, you got to rerun. So then I performed maintenance and ran it again. It's still out. And it's like, OMG. At this point, you're really want to pull your hair out. So these right here, that what we're actually testing is reagents on your instrument. So it's not the QC, the external QC. I've calibrated and performed maintenance, so it's probably not my instrument. It might be my reagents. It might be these that are already on your instrument. Because these have expiration dates. Okay, it might be close to the expiration date, so it's not working as good. Or something might have gotten up in there. Okay, so now you're going to change your reagent. And then you're probably thinking, well, why couldn't you change your reagent before you did all that maintenance and stuff like that? Well, the reason why these reagents are super expensive. Super expensive. So I'd rather do all this stuff before I did that. So change your reagent and then rerun your QC again. And guess what? It's still out. At this point, there's nothing else you can do. You have done everything. You have checked your QC, you reran it. It might have been something small. You reran it. Reset your instrument. You opened up a new bottle of QC, so you checked off your QC. You performed maintenance, you checked your instrument, you changed your reagent. So it's nothing to do right here. You don't know. You can't see the problem. Okay? So it's like, well, now what do I do? Now I'll know what to do. Call 1-800 service. Customer service. So now, the people that made this instrument are going to have to come in and they're going to have to figure out what the problem is. Because you've done everything that you know to do. So whenever you buy an instrument, most of the time you have a contract with the people that you bought the instrument from. And so remember how I told y'all in the beginning that just because you're a tech doesn't mean you're still in the lab doing stuff. There's other things that you can do. So one of these is working on these instruments, traveling and working on these instruments. Make these books, by the way, these books. So you could work for this company, traveling around the world, working on these instruments as a tech. And so You call this company and like, listen. And most of the time, they'll talk to you over the phone, and they'll tell you some stuff to do. Hey, did you rerun your QC and recalibrate? Yeah, I've already done that. Well, did you put a new QC on? Yep, I've done that. Did you do any maintenance? Well, I did some maintenance, but tell me some more steps. This is what I did. And you can tell them, I wiped this, I changed this probe, I did this, I did this. Okay, well, you did everything. Or they'll say, hey, go look in this compartment and see if there's anything in there. You go look, nope, there's nothing in there. Okay, well, it's not that. So they'll take you through troubleshooting steps too. Have you changed your reagent? Yep, I changed it. I don't know if that ain't it either. So they'll try, and sometimes they can even remote into your instrument and see what it's doing. And they might can figure out something. Well, if the person on the phone can't figure it out, that's when they send that service rep. And they film their thing, they work on their instrument. They can't leave until they get that running. So it might take an hour, it might take a day. Totally depends. But that is the 6 steps to perform when your QC is out. Okay. So for QC, you're going to do QC, and then if something is not right, you have to document. Because you're not documenting every bit of this, your lab manager is going to come to you and say, what the heck? Why don't I have my lipase result on this patient in the ER that's been sitting over there for 2 hours? And then if it ain't documented, what do we say? If it's not documented, it hadn't happened, it ain't done. So if you don't document it, then you can get in trouble. Documentation shows that you're doing your job. Okay. And then she can then take that over there to the physician who's sitting there complaining and cussing and ripping and roaring. Why don't I have my results on this patient? This patient's been sitting here for 2 hours. Hey, my instrument's down. You know, you have to document everything. CYA, okay, always.
Change reagent.
Okay.
You change reagent, got to change all the chemicals.
So not all of them, only the one that's causing the problem. So in this situation, you could change the light. Okay, yeah. Because in your chemistry analyzer, you see all them reagents. There's tons. Okay, all those are tests that you perform in your lab. So you will only change the one that's needed to be the problem. So definitions. Documentation of QC includes preventative maintenance records, temperature charts, and QC charts for specific assays. So that we were just looking at was a QC chart. Preventative maintenance records. So any maintenance that you do, that's part of QC. Temperature charts. So in your lab, some like refrigerators and stuff have temperature charts built into them. Like it's like a little graph that graphs it itself. But then some, you may have a thermometer in there where you look at the thermometer, you have a paper, you have to document a temperature. So temperature charts. Because a lot of these, like let's just say, for example, your blood bank refrigerator. You even have to literally document refrigerator temperature. Because blood is kept refrigerated. And if blood has been out at room temperature or actually within a certain degree, for a matter of time, you cannot give that blood. So let's just say, for example, that your blood bank refrigerator quit working. Okay. you need to know and follow the temperatures on that, because if it quits working and that blood gets a certain temperature, all that blood is gone. It's no good. You cannot give it to a patient. You can harm a patient. So you have to document your temperature charts. For chemistry, these chemistry analyzers put off a lot of heat, because they're constantly going. So they put off a bunch of heat. With that being said, in every chemistry analyzer, you have like a thermometer, and it'll tell you, it'll scream at you. It'll say, hey, it'll make this big loud noise, and it's saying, hey, this temperature, because you'll learn that all of those reagents, those analytes that we're testing for, so potassium, sodium, lipase, so forth, so on, they react at a certain temperature. Okay? So you have to maintain that temperature in the lab. QC monitors the accuracy and reproducibility of results through the use of controlled specimens. That is what QC is. It monitors the accuracy and reproducibility of results through the use of controlled specimens. The diagnostic usefulness of a test and its procedure is assessed by using statistical evaluations, such as the descriptions of the accuracy and reliability of the test and its methodology. The terms accuracy and precision are used to describe quality. So accuracy describes how close a test result is to the true value. Know these definitions. Precision describes how close a test result is to one another when the analysis of the same specimen are performed when repeated. So accuracy describes how close a test result is to the true value. And then precision is how close it is when repeated. So when I think about accuracy and precision, does everybody have this right here? When I think about accuracy and precision, I almost think about a bullseye. So let's just think of a bullseye. We want to get right here, right? In the middle. We want to get bullseye. Well, when we throw a dart and it lands right here, okay? And or we throw a dart and it is over here. Which throw was more accurate? The one right here, right? That throw, because it was close to the true result. Okay. Well, precision. We throw it, okay, and it is right here. We throw it again the same way, and it's right here. All right. Well, then somebody else comes and they throw it, and it's right here. And then they throw it again the same way, and it's right here. Which throws are more precise? These right here. Because they did it the exact same way, and they're right here together. Sorry. They're right here together versus these two, they were done the same way, but they're farther apart. Does that make sense? So it's the same in lab results. Accuracy is how close you get to the true value. And precision is how, when repeated, how close they are to one another. Accuracy can be improved by the following. The use of properly standardized procedures. So when I say standardized procedures, that's that procedure manual. And that's making sure that every one of your employees follows that procedure manual to a T. That's accuracy, the accuracy of your results. So what that's saying is I perform it the same way as the procedure. Laura comes behind me second shift. She performs it the exact same way. Katrina comes behind me on third shift, and she does it the exact same way. If we do it again the exact same way, we should get the same result every time, right? Because we're doing it all the exact same way. Statistically valid comparisons of new methods with established reference ranges, the use of samples of known values, so controls, doing quality control, and participation in a proficiency testing program. The precision of a test, which is its reproducibility, may be expressed as the standard deviation or derived coefficient of variation. So coefficient of variation. The CV can be used to compare the standard deviations of two samples. So how do you get the standard, the coefficient of variation? You need to know this formula. So CV, which is expressed in percent, is equal to standard deviation divided by the mean times 100. So let's just say, and we're gonna put this into like related to the lab later per se. But let's just say that in your testing you have a standard deviation of 4. I don't know. And then your mean of all those testings is 20. So you do 4 divided by 20 times 100. Your CV would be 20%. You just plug in those numbers. So sensitivity and specificity. So basically what you need to know about sensitivity and specificity, I'm not going to get into analytic versus clinical. But under clinical, it says assessing the sensitivity and specificity of a test result requires 4 factors. Test positive, test negative, disease present positive, and disease absent negative. So true positives are subjects who have a positive test result and also have the disease in question. True negatives are those who have a negative test and do not have the disease. So for example, a true positive means a person is pregnant and takes a pregnancy test and it is positive. That's a true positive, meaning they are pregnant and their tests come up positive. A true negative, they are not pregnant and they get a negative test result. That's a true negative. That makes sense? True positives and true negatives. Okay. False positives are those who have a positive test result but do not have the disease. So I was telling y'all about that lady that I had, and her her HCG was positive, but she was not pregnant. That is a false positive. Okay, you're testing for HCG, which is the pregnancy hormone. So what's the purpose of an HCG test? To what? Test for pregnancy. Okay. Well, you tested this lady and she was positive, but she was not pregnant. So in other words, the test was positive, but she has the absence of disease. That's a false positive. Does that make sense? Okay. And then false negatives are those who have a negative test result, but do have the disease. So if a woman is indeed pregnant, but then has a pregnancy test and her test is negative, then that would be a false negative, right? Because she is actually pregnant. So tell me, in an instance where you think that could happen. When could a person, a woman who is pregnant, get a negative pregnancy test, you think? If she's too early. Exactly. If she doesn't have enough of the HCG hormone in her system, that would be a false negative because she's actually pregnant, but it come up as negative. Does that make sense? Okay. Both specificity and sensitivity are desirable characteristics for a test, but in different clinical situations, one is preferred over the other. So the clinical sensitivity of a test is defined as the proportion of subjects with a specific disease or condition who have a positive test result. So sensitivity is your true positives, okay? It's defined as the proportion of people with a specific disease or condition who have a positive result. What sensitivity means is that the sensitivity of a test, when I say this test is really sensitive, when I say that, that means when I test whatever I'm testing for, so we've been talking about HCG and pregnancy tests. So when I check a woman for pregnancy, if she's truly pregnant and it's positive, that means that that test is sensitive. That makes sense? Okay. Specificity is defined as the proportion of subjects without the disease or condition that has a negative test result. So those are your true negatives. So when I say this test is specific, that means that when I check a negative person for this test, it should come out negative and not positive. So it's specific. So you want your testing method, so your pregnancy test that you're performing, that kit, you want it to be specific and sensitive. Those are both very good things. Does that make sense? So when you test a woman for pregnancy, you want it to come out positive. When you test them and they're negative, you want it to come out negative and not positive. Does that make sense? As far as the definitions, one of my former students to remember what that meant. So she said that it predicts, assay correctly predicts with a positive result. It's a true positive sensitivity. She says that sometimes when people are positive, like I don't know how I can't remember how she did it, but she put a smiley face beside it. And she says sometimes people are positive, they're sensitive to stuff. or something, and then she said specificity was just opposite. And I was like, okay, that makes no sense. But apparently that class, it made sense to them. And literally, when they had to explain it, they were like throwing out smiley faces. And I was like, well, it worked, whatever. But anyway. But specificity, I mean, sensitivity is your true positive and specificity is your true negative. I'm not really concerned about predictive values. So go to monitoring quality. So how do you monitor quality? So proficiency testing is incorporated into CLIA requirements. CLIA is concerned about two different types of testing. Which ones? Moderate and high complexity testing. And so what CLIA says is that if you perform moderate and high complexity testing in your lab, you have to perform proficiency testing. What's proficiency testing? An external test by an accrediting agency. So remember I said that you get samples from this place. They send them to you. You do testing on it. You get results for it. You send those results back out and you get graded on it. That's a proficiency test. So each lab should participate in an external proficiency testing program as a means of verification of laboratory accuracy. Identical samples are sent to a group of labs participating in this PT program. Each lab analyzes that specimen, reports the results to the agency, and is evaluated and graded on those results compared to the ones from those other labs. In this way, QC between labs is monitored. So what that is saying, not only does proficiency testing monitor the person doing the testing, it monitors your results. And if you get the correct results, that's saying that you've done everything. You're performing maintenance. You're performing QC and stuff like that because obviously you're getting the correct answer, right? So it also monitors all of that. Control specimens. So that's testing for all of that stuff. You have your internal and external controls. So a QC program for the lab uses a control specimen, which is a specimen with a known value that is similar in composition to the patient's blood. Make sure you know that definition. Control specimen is a specimen with a known value that is similar in composition to the patient's blood. So a minute ago, with that lipase, okay, remember it has a reference range associated with it. So it knows how much lipase is in that specimen. So whenever you run that specimen, it said the lipase was supposed to be between this and this. So whenever you run it, it is known. You're supposed to get between this and this. Okay, it's a known value. A control specimen must be carried through the entire test procedure and treated in exactly the same way as any unknown specimen. So you're supposed to treat it like a patient sample. It must be affected by all the variables that affect that unknown specimen. Control specimens are used because repeated determinations on the same or different portions, called aliquots, of the same sample will not give identical values. So what that means is if you use that little bit amount that you're putting on there. You're only putting a little bit of the control substance on there. You put it on there, you rerun it over and over again, you're gonna get, you might not get the same result, but you're gonna get close to it. And it should be within that reference range. Does that make sense? If the control value in a determination is out of the acceptable range or out of control, one or more of the following factors may be responsible. So, deterioration of reagents. We said that in this way, okay? Faulty instrument or equipment. Dirty glassware. Lack of attention to timing or incubation temperature. Use of a method not suited to the needs and facilities of the lab, or use of poor technique by the technologist doing the testing. So it could be several different things. That's why you have to go through that checklist. Reference range statistics. So statistically, the reference range for a particular measurement is usually related to a normal bell-shaped curve. So if you look up real quick at figure 6.1, so you see that mountain right there, looks like a mountain. That's the curve that it's talking about, and it's called a Gaussian curve. It's been shown to be correct for almost all types of biological, chemical, and physical measurements. A statistically valid series of individuals who are thought to represent a normal, healthy group of people are measured. So, you're like, what the heck are you talking about? So, on this curve right here, it's saying that the normal healthy group of people, should fall in between plus or minus 3 SD. Okay? So a normal healthy person, their result that they're getting, their results should fall within this standard deviation. Okay, yeah. So it's saying that normal healthy group of people, the result that you get for whatever analyte you're testing for, it should fall between here to here. Okay. And so it makes a curve. That's the normal curve. It's called a Gaussian curve. Well, it's based on your standard deviation. So this is minus 3 SD, minus 2 SD, minus 1x SD. What is x? So whenever in math, what was always x when concerning statistics? And I know a lot of y'all probably haven't taken statistics, but this is also an algebra, not like 3x plus 4y. So not that x, but when you have x with usually with a line over it. Huh? Mean? Yep, your mean. This is your mean, so this is your average, right? And then plus 1 SD, plus 2 SD, plus 3 SD. Okay? So the mean, what is the mean? Yeah, but what is the mean? Average. So the mean is the mathematical average calculated by dividing the sum of all individual values by the number of values. So if I said you had a set of values and the values were okay, how would you get the mean? You would add all of these up, which is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And then divide by what? Divide by 5. That gives you your a big set of numbers, okay? You also have the median. So remember, for the median is the middle. Think of like the median in a row, okay? So you would have to put these in order to get the median. So if we did, and you don't repeat numbers for the median, what would be the median of these numbers? Four. Increasing it, I mean, yeah. So you would do 2 plus 3, you would actually, 2 plus 3, by 2, which will be 2.5. So you would take these two numbers, when you have an even amount, take these two. Obviously, these are easy, because what's in the middle of 2 and 3? 2.5, right? Well, also, you would add these, divide by 2, 2.5. So 2.5 would be your median. What would be of these your mode? Remember, mode is your most often. So mean, MEANA, average, median, middle, and then mode occurs most frequently or most often. Mode, often. So, this Gaussian curve right here, it has your plus or minus 1 SD, your plus or minus 2 SD, and your plus or minus 3 SD. So it says, it talks about, well, you can look at these examples, use mean, median, and mode explained in the following examples, and that has 1, 2, 3, 4. It says the SD is the square root of the variance of the values in any one of the observations or series in a test results. In normal population, 68% of the values will be clustered above and below the average. So that would fall between 1 SD, so plus or minus 1 SD. So this 68% right here is saying that 68% will fall between plus or minus 1 SD. Now it's saying that 95% will fall between plus or minus 2 SD. And then 99.73% will fall between plus or minus 3 SD. You need to know these numbers. When talking about QC, your reference range should be within plus or minus 2 SD. So the reference range is the range of values that includes 95% or plus or minus 2 SD of the test results for a healthy reference population. So that's your normal range. Your normal range would be plus or minus 2 SD. So going back to right here. For lipase, it says the range is 27 to 35. So that would be your plus or minus 2SD. Your minus 2SD would be 27, and your plus 2SD would be 35. Does that make sense? And right here, the first time you ran it, you got 37, which is only 2 over your 2SD, right? So it's pretty close. That's why you got this 1 over here, and then if you go down, it says your 1, that means it's greater than 2SD. And that's what it was, right? If your 2SD, your 2SD is 35, then 37 is greater than 35, right? And it told you that. It's greater than 2SD. So if your reference range is 2SD, if anything falls out of 2SD, then it is outside of range. Okay? That makes sense?
We do the result of how, like, it's out of 2SD range, 3SD, 4SD.
It like the little error message over here, you mean?
Yes, then when you go down to the bottom where it say, well, greater than 2SD, says out of 4 range, which we're gonna rip that 4.
Yeah, so it'll say 2 successive controls greater than 4SC between the values. And so when you're thinking of QC, so remember that you have a positive and a negative QC, right? Or a normal and an abnormal QC, whatever. If it's 3, if it's, I think 4. 4 or 3. Let me make sure. I'll have it right here. We're gonna talk about it in the intro more so. But I'm gonna say it's 4. Which chapter it's in. But oh, you're on it. Okay, yeah. So that's 3. So let's just say that you run your controls, and on one control it's greater than 2SC, but then the other control it's greater than 1SC, which is okay, right? 2 and 1, you add them together, that's 3. 3SC is outside of your range. So if you add both of them up and it's over 3, you cannot run your patient results. So remember 2SC equals your reference range, which is what it's supposed to be, right? So if you run your normal and your abnormal controls, if you run your normal controls and it's 1 SC, and then you run your abnormal control and it's 1 SC. Well, that's below 2, so you already know that that's okay, right? But if you add 1 and 1 together, that's 2. Then you're good. Okay. If you did 2 SC, I know it is 4. Okay. If you did 2 SC and 1 SC, well, 2 SC is what it's supposed to be. And 1 SC is within range because it's less than 2 SC. You add both of them together, it's 3. That's okay. That's okay. So let's just say you had 2 SC and 2 SC. That equals 4 SC, and that's not okay. Because it's saying 99% falls within 3 SC anyway. That makes sense on that curve. So if you did 2 and 2, that's 4. That ain't it. Okay. It'll work. Right, 2 and 1 side. We're going to talk about this more extensively. So this is just kind of what you need to know right now. Is that 68% falls within 1, 95 falls within 2, and 95 and 2 SC is also considered your reference range. And then 3, 99.73 falls within 3. And that makes up that that makes up that Gaussian curve. That's essentially what you need to know right now. And then mean, median, mode. Mean, average, median, middle, mode occurs most frequently. So standard outcomes, or testing outcomes, sorry. So before physicians can determine whether a patient has a disease, they must know what is acceptable for a representative population of similar patients. So like the same age, the same gender, same ethnicity, in addition to the analytic method used for assay. So what that's saying is sometimes your reference ranges will be based on ethnicity, or they may be based on gender. So for example, a hemoglobin. A normal hemoglobin for a female is usually between 12 and 14. But for a male, it can be up to 18, 14 to 18. If you have a hemoglobin, a woman that has a hemoglobin of 18, then that hemoglobin is high, something's going on. But a male, usually because males have more body mass and they're more muscular and stuff like that, so they have more hemoglobin going to their tissues, their hemoglobins are usually a little bit more elevated. So that's what it's saying, is sometimes it might be based on gender or ethnicity. So like, for example, that CDC instrument over there, it was made in Sweden. So their normal reference values for like red cells and stuff like that, and hemoglobin are kind of lower than those of South Georgia. Because a lot of Swedish people like eat fish and stuff and are like super healthy, versus like here we're not. We like to eat southern fried food, so some reference values might change. So that's what it's saying, is that before a physician can determine whether that result is acceptable, then they have to know what is acceptable for that population. And how would they know that? First off, they should know kind of in general an about idea, but what can they look at that would give them that determination? Just went over it. What's that called? It's this to this. It's 2SD. Your reference range, yes. So what it's saying, he gets a report and it's a 30-year-old female, okay? The reference range might be 12 to 14. And her hemoglobin is 13.2. So he can look at that reference range and determine that that's normal for this person, right? Or if he gets a 19-year-old male, okay, his hemoglobin is 16.2. It falls within that reference range of males, so he can determine that that's a normal hemoglobin for that patient. What if the female had a hemoglobin of 16.2? Is that normal? No, it's a little bit elevated. So he can now make the determination, she has a little bit elevated hemoglobin, something going on. Okay? So he has to know essentially what the reference range is. And we determine the reference range because we have to test a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff that goes along with it. But we have to test it and we have to, it's called correlation. You compare test specimen results to results in a representative population. So correlation, so let's just say that correlation is essentially, you have to, in order to get a reference range, you have to take, and I'll tell you what this consists of because you don't have to write this down right now. But you take, I think it's like 20 healthy people, okay? And you would run, let's just say that you're trying to figure out the reference range for a CBC panel, okay? And a CBC, that's your white cells, red cells, platelets, all that good stuff. So you perform CBCs on 20 healthy people, okay? You would then correlate it. So what that means is you did it on your instrument on 20 healthy people, and then you would send it to somewhere else, okay? And see if they get about the same results. And so you have to correlate those results and come up with your reference ranges. It's a whole drawn out process. Turn the page. Next paragraph. It says, although generally accepted values are published, reference values will vary between laboratories and between geographic locations. So like I was telling y'all a minute ago, that CBC comes with, that instrument comes with their own reference ranges, but like I said, they eat a lot of fish. So they might have like a lower hemoglobin. I think that reference range over there on the hemoglobin is like 10 to 12. That's low for us. Over here, if you got a 10 hemoglobin, we're going to sit there, oh, you need iron. You know, versus over there, oh, that's cool. Because they eat a lot of fish, so they're going to be like this. What do we eat? Red meat, right? We eat meat over here. So, that's what it's saying. Or it can vary between labs. So, at Meadows, their normal hemoglobin they've done correlations and stuff like that. They say that their normal hemoglobin is 12 to 14. But in Swainsboro, it might be 11 to 14. Okay? They perform correlations. They make their own reference ranges. Okay? But your reference ranges, so for example, you're going to have to learn reference ranges. I teach you the reference ranges for your ASCP test because that's what I'm concerned about. You have to pass this in order to become an MLT. So I'm going to teach you the ranges based on that, not what Meadows says is the reference ranges, not what Waynesboro says is the reference ranges. I'm teaching you the reference ranges based on this test. With that being said, get all the way down, and back up. So in a chemistry, so for the ASCP, it's saying that your sodium should be between 136 to 145. But then whenever we get to our chemistry book, I think our chemistry book has 135 to 145. So what this is saying is reference ranges will differ, but they're around the same thing, regardless of wherever you go. Okay, so a sodium of 135 based on these. Yes, it's outside of range, but it's not that bad. Okay, now if you had a sodium of 120, that's bad wherever you go. Okay, but a sodium of 135, that's a little outside of range here, but like according to Meadows, that's normal. But you see, it's not a major difference. That makes sense? So, and I can show you probably some lab results that I have. I'll pull them up and show you like lab results, how they differ from from different places. So if they're around the same thing though, okay, your reference ranges are. So, they will vary between labs, but they're generally accepted values, meaning they're around the same thing. Each lab must give the physician information concerning the range of reference values for that particular lab. So what it's saying is that you're going to have the result, you're going to have a reference range out here beside it. That physician needs to have a reference, which he should already know, makes big books, right? But he needs to have a reference to make sure that, hey, this is normal or this is accurate. Okay? Validating new procedures. So the QC program also determines how new procedures are validated before being included as one of the methods routinely used by the lab. Each lab must determine the confidence limits or reproducibility for each procedure used and establish acceptable limits of variation for control specimens. The QC program includes calculation of the mean and the SC and the preparation of control charts for each procedure. And we're going to talk about that later. So that's just when you are introducing a new procedure for your lab, you have to repeat QC samples over and over and over again. It really gets aggravating. So it's just saying that you have to make sure what you're doing is right. Okay. And it says parallel testing of kits. So what that means is if you were introducing a new QC. So let's just say that you open up a bottle of QC and that QC is good opened for 14 days. That means that you can only run that QC for 14 days, right? Well, how many days are in the month?
30, 31.
30 to 31 usually. That's it, different, right? So 30 to 31 days. So that means you're gonna have to open at least 2 bottles of that QC within the month, right? So what it's saying is you run that one QC, you have to run it, or it's good for 14 days. But usually 5 days before, well, actually, but about 5 days before that QC expires, you also run the other one with it. And you correlate those results to make sure that that new bottle that you're opening is working okay. Does that make sense? So that's parallel testing. That's what it's talking about. Then turn the page. The last 2 bullets. If the test is moderate or high complexity testing, which is what CLIA cares about, and the change is a new kit manufacturer, then the new test kit must be validated for accuracy and precision. So what that's saying is if you do a strep test and it's McKesson brand, okay, let's just say that you found a new manufacturer that has it cheaper. Does the same thing, but it's cheaper. Same amount of tests, all this stuff, but it's cheaper. So you're gonna start doing that one. So let's just say that it's Fisher brand. Before you introduce that Fisher brand into your lab, you have to perform stuff to make sure that it's correct, okay? This can be done with controls, other known samples, or comparison with an old kit. So that's correlation. That's what that is. If the laboratory is receiving a new lot shipment of the same test kit, only controls need to be done. If the test is a wave test, then the lab just needs to follow the instructions by the manufacturer. And that's that. It seems like a lot, but we'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow.